La nuit est si longue, buvons ce martini. Une femme voit son présent qui naît dans la nuit. Les étoiles tombent à part face à la lune. Elle respire son corps, elle s'abandonne dans la nuit. Ses mains glissent entre son corps. Ses lèvres rouges, ses yeux velours. Le regard est ébloui. La magie tombe dans la nuit.
Paris, Part 2. When it comes to Europe's most elegant capital, Paris immediately springs to mind. The heart of France, refined and light, beautiful and romantic. It stands apart from any other city in this remarkable country. Often referred to as a separate state within a state, with its own traditions honed over many centuries. Anyone planning to visit Paris eagerly anticipates this heartwarming encounter. The picturesque Montmartre, the Eiffel Tower, the Champs-Élysées, lauded it seems in every language of the world. And the profound silence of the cozy Parisian courtyards? The sunlight reflecting off the pavements of the French capital, akin to fine wine, will envelop you warmly and, who knows, perhaps alter your perspective on life. Here in this splendid city, everything exudes history. The architectural allure of Paris, meticulously preserved, takes on a special charm thanks to the abundance of parks, squares, and gardens. Everything in this capital has long served as a benchmark of perfection. To witness this, hundreds of thousands of tourists flock here to Paris, so diverse and so enchanting. Paris has always stood out among all the remarkable landmarks of France. It is rightfully called a city of wild impressions, emotions, a fairy tale city, a trendsetter in fashion and refined cuisine. A city that everyone dreams of visiting at least once in their lifetime. And when the lucky ticket is finally in your hands, a fair thought arises: how to plan the trip to see everything and make Parisian memories last until the next journey, or maybe even a lifetime. We have the modest intention to help. We hope our travel video will be useful to you. Let's start with a friendly advice. If you're visiting Paris for the first time, don't try to grasp the infinite. No one has managed to do that. And when the hassles of traveling are behind you, your suitcase is not a burden anymore. And you've had your first cup of coffee in the capital of France. It's time to head to the Eiffel Tower. On the question of who built the Eiffel Tower, the overwhelming majority of those surveyed probably won't be mistaken with the answer. It's quite obvious. It is well known that the Eiffel Tower is the creation of Gustave Eiffel for the grand opening of the World's Fair in Paris in 1889. This structure was meant to be spectacular and serve as original entrance gates to the exhibition pavilions. However, in reality, it's not quite like that. 5 years before the fair, a 28-year-old Alsatian named Maurice Koechlin came up with the idea of building a vertical metal tower in Paris over 300 meters high. Of course, there was no talk of setting any records, but the bold idea was in the air and did not let the young engineer sleep. In Washington, they were about to install the Statue of Liberty, and Maurice himself was not least involved in designing its internal structures. One day he shared his thoughts with his colleague, Émile Nouguy. Both agreed that Paris was no less deserving. The engineers got to work, drawing sketches and making general calculations day and night. In 1884, the project was completed, and the ambitious engineers nervously presented it to their patron, Mr. Eiffel. The construction of the tower did not interest the authoritative architect at all. He shook his head and refused to bless the project. But even a hesitant shake of the head is some sort of approval. Maurice and Émile did not give up, but on the contrary, found specialists who agreed to develop a detailed construction plan on the required scale. Adding a few convincing design lines, the engineers returned to Eiffel because the improved plan required a patent. It was at this moment that Gustave Eiffel's signature appeared. He understood well that his name would expedite the administrative procedures. Eiffel put his surname above 2 others and persuaded the president of the World's Fair to announce a competition for the best project of a metal tower in the center of Paris. That is, in all this mess, the meter was attentive and did not forget about itself. According to the competition conditions, the tower was supposed to be 300 meters high, on a square base of 125 meters, and serve as the entrance to the Champs-Élysées. And the miracle happened. The competition conditions coincided exactly with Eiffel's already completed design. It should be noted that 107 projects participated in the competition. The most original was a 300-meter guillotine tower. Let's agree, friends. We didn't lose much from the fact that this insane idea remained just an idea. Imagine if it had been approved. We would have had a massive guillotine in the heart of Paris. Not so romantic, huh? Then, Eiffel signs a contract with his determined engineers, in which they are obligated to grant him, Mr. Eiffel, exclusive patent rights without any limitations. In exchange, he covers the expenses for patent registration and pledges to pay the engineers a whole 1% of the amount he earns from the construction. Additionally, he commits to mentioning the names of Maurice Koechlin and Émile Nouguy every time the tower is discussed. It's uncertain whether the world-renowned engineer-architect fulfilled all the obligations. Only one thing is certain: the last commitment wasn't fulfilled. Have you ever heard of young Koechlin and his colleague? Despite the strong protests from dissatisfied Parisians against the construction of this metallic monster, the first visitors to the exhibition were enthralled by the attraction. In the review book, someone vowed to name their granddaughter Eiffeline, while someone romantically wrote, "From the top of this tower, you can see the backs of swallows." Today, it's not just a 300-meter steel structure, but a true symbol of Paris. Is it worth suggesting a date at the Eiffel Tower? That's a rhetorical question. There are rumors swirling around Paris that every day over 100 excited men hear the coveted yes to marriage proposals at its top. So, dear gentlemen, if you feel you're ready, rush to buy an engagement ring, tickets to Paris, and immediately ascend the Eiffel Tower with all your might. They say it's a surefire bet, because the view from there is so breathtaking that someone will surely say yes. And let's add from ourselves, before this solemn moment. Find out if your beloved is afraid of heights, so that the most important moment of your life doesn't turn into the biggest fiasco. And one more thing, no less important. You can visit Paris 100 times, but if you don't have a single photo near the Eiffel Tower, who will believe you? Another one of the most beautiful Parisian landscapes opens up from the pedestrian Bridge of Arts. It is perhaps the most popular tourist attraction in the capital of France. If you enjoy walking, we highly recommend coming here and taking a look around in the middle of the bridge. You'll be treated to a captivating panorama. On one side, you can see the rectangular courtyard of the Louvre Palace. On the other, the dome of the Institut de France. And as always, the ever-present Eiffel Tower will peek out. The spires of the Île de la Cité, other Parisian bridges, embankments, and of course, the River Seine with its pleasure boats will all stand out. The Bridge of Arts looks very romantic, despite its simplicity. In its time in Paris, it was an engineering marvel. Connecting the banks of the wide river, it had 7 arched spans. and its huge reinforced concrete supports were faced with specially imported stone. The bridge's supports look quite bulky, but this only emphasizes the delicacy of the lace-like arches, which seem weightless. It should be noted that 219 years ago, the bridge looked more exquisite than it does now. It resembled a lush garden with intertwining flowers. The length of the bridge is quite decent, 155 meters, and its width is 11. Wooden walkways and benches made it extremely cozy. A fabulous sum was spent on its construction in those times, over 780,000 francs. The bridge, built by order of Napoleon in 1801, was named after the Louvre, which in the early 19th century was called the Palace of the Arts. It was a promenade bridge between the banks of the Seine for noble, affluent citizens. On the day of the bridge's opening in 1804, 500,000 ordinary French people surged here uncontrollably. It was not without jostling and crowding. For a long time, a toll was charged for using the bridge. In 1848, after the First French Revolution, it was abolished. Since then, both poor and wealthy Parisians could freely cross to the other side of the Seine. At the end of the 18th century, the Bridge of Arts was rebuilt because the embankment needed to be widened, and there was an increase in freight traffic across the Seine. The bridge was restored after bombings during World War II, and it once again became a decoration of post-war Paris. In 1979, a huge barge collided with one of the bridge's supports, leading to a significant collapse of the supports. And each time, the bridge was rebuilt, relying on miraculously preserved design drawings. The Bridge of Arts is one of the favorite places for walks for Parisians. Artists gather here for plein-air painting sessions. Photographers choose a spot for the most striking shot, and regular thematic exhibitions are organized. In the summer, according to a long-standing Parisian tradition, picnics are arranged. Tablecloths with simple dishes are spread out right on the wooden walkway. Before sunset, when the gentle rays create soft evening light, the bridge turns into a kind of artistic canvas, depicting the lives of Parisians and the guests of their incomparable city. In recent years, lovers have established a romantic tradition on the Bridge of Arts. As a sign of their commitment to each other, they affix a padlock to the bridge and toss the key into the Seine. Love locks have become abundant, posing a threat to the strength of the railings. In the summer of 2014, under the weight of the locks, part of the railings collapsed. Police rushed to the scene, rescuing both the bridge and the people. And guess what? Amidst the bewildered rescuers, a Romanian couple slipped through the railing, attached a lock, threw the key into the water, and shared a passionate kiss. Perhaps that was the moment photographers captured the best shots. However, the Paris City Hall became deeply concerned about the environmental damage caused by the countless keys thrown into the Seine. As an experiment, some of the bridge's railings were replaced with special glass. It didn't help. On June 1st, 2015, the dismantling of the locks began because their weight posed a safety risk to visitors. According to rough estimates, their number exceeded 1 million, adding an additional 45 tons of load. It's heartening that the City Hall workers remained romantic Parisians rather than hardened bureaucrats. The tradition of lovers was decided to be preserved by replacing the railings with stronger ones. There are always many tourists around the Bridge of Arts, in rain, snow, and beautiful sunny weather alike. Coming here is a separate pleasure in Paris. And what to do next? We seem to have hinted at quite well. Sometimes we think that certain things have always existed. However, there comes a time when we are supposed to learn that this is not quite the case. One of the most famous sculptures in the world, a symbol of freedom and democracy, Lady Liberty. What epithets have not been chosen for this statue? You've probably guessed that we're talking about the Statue of Liberty. It is located on Liberty Island, which once guarded the port of New York. But few know that the creators of the statue were Parisians. The idea of creating this liberty-loving symbol came from the French scientist, lawyer, and democracy advocate Edouard Laboulaye. Gathering like-minded people, Laboulaye proposed to present a symbolic gift from the French people to America as a sign of friendship. And that became the Statue of Liberty. Its creation was entrusted to the sculptor Bartholdi and the engineer-architect Eiffel, the namesake of the most famous tower in Paris. France presented the statue to the United States for the centenary of the Declaration of Independence, albeit 10 years late. Since 1886 and to this day, the Statue of Liberty has been welcoming ships in the New York harbor. In turn for the anniversary of the storming of the Bastille, the American diaspora in the French capital presented Paris with a reduced-scale copy of the sculpture. The almost 12-meter Model of Liberty was installed on Swan Island, which is located not far from the Field of Mars in Paris. However, inventive Parisians wouldn't be themselves if they didn't experiment with liberty. It should be noted that the play on words here is quite appropriate. Initially, the copper statue on a concrete pedestal faced east towards the Eiffel Tower. But from the 1830s onwards, it turned its gaze west, toward its American elder sister. No one suffered from this, and liberty didn't either. It's hard to overlook another interesting fact. The model for the Parisian Liberty was Isabella Boyer, the widow of Isaac Singer, a world-renowned manufacturer of sewing machines. The monument is entirely made of copper fragments, which are attached to a sturdy metal frame in a special way where the joining lines are practically imperceptible. Copper ore for casting was specially imported from Russia, and the metal base underwent numerous tests with strong winds and water before installation. One of the most intriguing aspects about Paris is that it boasts not just one, but at least 4 statues of liberty. The first of these, located in the Luxembourg Garden, has been drawing visitors for over a century. Unfortunately, in 2011, vandals shamelessly stole its torch. After restoration, the Statue of Liberty found a new home near the entrance to the Musée d'Orsay, on the left bank of the Seine, right in the heart of Paris. Meanwhile, in the Luxembourg Garden, a 2-meter-high bronze replica was installed. The third statue can be found in the Paris Museum of Arts and Crafts. Interestingly, this is the original model used in the creation of the New York Statue of Liberty. To catch a glimpse of the fourth one, you'll need to ascend the Eiffel Tower. From there, you can spot the sculpture standing on a barge moored to the pier on the right bank of the Seine River. Tourists never miss the iconic Alma Bridge. Adorning it is the Flame of Liberty, a gilded, full-size replica of an element from the American statue's sculpture. Some visitors, perhaps mistaking it for a tribute to Princess Diana, who tragically died in the tunnel beneath the bridge in 1997, have adorned it with flowers, turning the large torch into an improvised monument. Throughout the year, you'll find an abundance of floral tributes at its base, paying homage to the memory of the Welsh princess. If you're exploring the capital of France, simply visiting the Eiffel Tower, the Louvre, the Champs-Élysées, and other well-known Parisian landmarks won't suffice. It's worth taking the time to see at least one of the statues symbolizing France's indomitability and love of freedom. After all, you can never have too much liberty. You've already toured the Eiffel Tower and are filled with impressions from the Louvre. So let's take this opportunity to suggest visiting the Parisian Hôtel des Invalides, which today houses a very interesting army museum. Let's clarify. This isn't an invitation to see a few rusty cannons and a couple of nuclear warheads. Let's mentally transport ourselves to the 17th century. At that time, France was involved in numerous wars, and many wounded soldiers returned from the battlefield. After their discharge from military service, they were left practically penniless and often resorted to begging. The Sun King, Louis XIV, almost daily witnessed such distress from his carriage window. organizing to remove former heroes from the streets meant providing them with shelter and a pension. Thus, the Hôtel des Invalides was established in the center of Paris, with shelter, a hospital, and a cathedral. Architect Liberal Bruant was tasked with overseeing the construction, creating a genuine masterpiece in the classical style. The first pensioners were housed there in 1674. The Hôtel des Invalides became a refuge, barracks, hospital, and workshop all at once. It was a true military town, where life was regulated by not very strict military laws. By the end of the 18th century, nearly 4,000 veterans lived there. The most capable among them served as guards, particularly at the Bastille, while others worked as cobblers, weavers in tapestry workshops, or engraved prints. Napoleon Bonaparte, initially as First Consul and later as Emperor, reorganized the Hôtel des Invalides and transformed it into the national military pantheon. In his view, it was where those who had dedicated themselves to serving France should be buried. This initiative received very positive responses from society. Could Napoleon have known then that he was building his final bastion? Today, the halls of the Hôtel des Invalides house the exhibits of the Army Museum. Its exposition offers visitors a vast number of thematic exhibition halls. They contain a unique collection of objects related to France's military history, starting from the Middle Ages. You will undoubtedly be impressed by antique armor, uniforms, military equipment, swords, sabers, artillery shells, chevrons, and personal belongings of France's distinguished military leaders. Visitors are welcomed by the parade ground of the Hôtel des Invalides, where they encounter a true gem of the museum collection, a unique series of 60 classic bronze French artillery specimens. These are not just weapons, but true works of art, adorned with heraldic and ornamental motifs throughout. It's fair to say that almost everything here makes an impression. Even if you're completely indifferent to weaponry, the exhibition pieces will undoubtedly catch your eye. How can one resist taking a photo next to the patterned mortar? That's the question. The museum's location within the same premises as the Hôtel des Invalides gives it a special atmosphere. Cannons are just cannons. However, what attracts all tourists without exception is the small cathedral of the Hôtel des Invalides, where Napoleon's tomb lies adjacent to the graves of famous French figures. The emperor's sarcophagus is placed in a spacious circular crypt, surrounded by decorative marble railings. Anyone wanting to view the sarcophagus must lean on the balustrade. Whether you want to or not, you'll have to bow your head. Napoleon stipulated that he be buried in a chapel with a gilded dome visible from any point in Paris. Such a chapel was found precisely in the Hôtel des Invalides. However, a considerable amount of gold was needed for the dome. In 1989, the decorative finish was updated once again, this time gilded. It took a whopping 12 kilograms of precious metal for this purpose. Napoleon's ashes are placed in 6 nested coffins. The first is made of tin, the second of redwood, the third and fourth of lead, the fifth of oak, and the 6th of ebony. The coffins are housed in a 35-ton sarcophagus made of cherry finish granite. Its heavy lid is only moved on special occasions. At such times, through the glass, one can see Napoleon's darkened face. This sarcophagus is a gift to France from the Emperor of Russia, Nicholas I, the brother of Napoleon's conqueror, Alexander. Isn't it ironic? Now it's time to head to Tuileries Garden, located right in the heart of the city, just a few hundred meters from the Louvre. Back in the 15th century, this area lay beyond the walls of the Louvre fortress, serving as both a city dump and a clay quarry for making tiles. Tuile, in French, translates to tile, hence the park's name, making it one of the oldest parks globally. The history of Tuileries Garden resonates with the era of monarchic rule in France. In the 16th century, Catherine de' Medici held the throne, known for her stern demeanor and ruthless character, earning her the moniker the Black Queen. Despite her tough exterior, she had a deep affection for her children. The royal residence felt too somber and unwelcoming for the Queen Mother, but she couldn't bear to part with her beloved sons. This led to the idea of constructing a personal palace adjacent to the Louvre. In 1594, the finishing touches were put on the walls of the magnificent edifice, christened the Tuileries. By royal decree, a splendid garden in the Italian style was laid out adjacent to it. 6 alleys stretched lengthwise, intersected by 8 others. The vast expanse of the Tuileries Park is striking, covering an area of 250,000 square meters. Flower beds were meticulously arranged around the garden's perimeter in a chessboard pattern, with architects even finding space for vegetable gardens and a labyrinth. The park's botanical collection boasted over 3,000 specimens from around the globe. Rumors circulated that Catherine de' Medici intended to cultivate dangerous and poisonous plants in the garden, but her cunning plan failed. A century later, André Le Nôtre, the chief gardener at Louis XIV's court, undertook a complete overhaul of the Tuileries Garden, imparting it with a classical French style. It breathed new life. Living hedges of shrubs emerged, numerous parterre flower beds were planted, and 2 pools were added. One of these, situated at the park's center, took on an octagonal shape. The perfect symmetry of the octagon, with its equal sides and angles, complemented the park's rectangular stylistic lines. Credit is due to the courtly masters of park architecture who skillfully integrated the octagon into the central structure's ornamentation. The original park pool, with its splendid fountain, likely served not just as an ornament, but also had practical use for the royal family in monarchical times. It wasn't until 2 centuries after its creation that ordinary French citizens could enjoy the Tuileries Garden's lush beauty. The Great Revolution of 1789 abolished absolute monarchy, granting commoners access to royal domains. Today, chairs dot the Tuileries Park, inviting visitors to bask in its beauty and the soothing sounds of its fountains. Brave souls even take a dip in the original octagonal pool, with no prohibition against doing so. It's safe to say that the Tuileries Park is a cherished spot for both Parisians and tourists alike. After the bustling streets of Paris, it offers a tranquil retreat. Without a doubt, the park leaves an indelible impression on all who explore its historical secrets and wander its timeless pathways. Vendome Square in Paris is a district of very interesting buildings and their inhabitants. It's located almost in the very center of Paris, about 3 kilometers east of the legendary Eiffel Tower. The square dates back to the time of Louis XIV. Once, the estate of the Duke of Vendome, the son of King Henry IV, stood here. Hence, the square was named Vendome, although Parisians often refer to it simply as Vendome. It's hard to confuse it with others. In the middle of the square rises a huge column known as the Vendome or Austerlitz column. The entire surrounding district was designed by the personal architect of King Louis XIX, Jean de Maussan. His plan was to build what was called the Royal Square. It was to be a classical square of buildings with a statue of the monarch on horseback in the center. We don't doubt the architect's abilities, but the enormous wig on the head of the Sun King turned out to be his most successful feature. By the way, the model for the sculpture is still kept in the Russian Hermitage. Later, the architect began construction around the perimeter of the square. He lacked funding, so he had to quickly cheapen the project. Firstly, he changed the shape of the square by cutting off the corners. And secondly, he replaced attic floors with residential floors with roof-shaped ceilings. In other words, Mansart invented a new architectural element, the famous Parisian mansards. Gradually, distinguished citizens with decent wealth began to settle in Vendome Square. For example, Baron Baudard de Saint-James owned house number 12, the treasurer of the French Navy. It was he who presented Queen Marie Antoinette with a necklace worth 800,000 francs. Composer Frédéric Chopin, the last Polish romantic, lived in this mansion a few months before his death. The house has belonged to the Chaume jewelry dynasty for 100 years now. One of its representatives made a crown for none other than Napoleon Bonaparte. House number 13 made history by having a standard meter made of marble attached to its facade. Thus, the residents of Paris were introduced to the new unit of length. House number 15 deserves a special mention. It's the famous Ritz Hotel, one of the most luxurious in the French capital. F. Scott Fitzgerald and Princess Diana once stayed here. Coco Chanel's little black dress and other unique fashion creations were made right at the Ritz Hotel. One of the world's most famous women never owned her own home and spent almost her entire life living in hotel suites. For a long time, Franz Anton Mesmer lived in house number 16. Now it gets interesting. The Austrian gained fame for his idea of so-called animal magnetism. In the 1780s, his teaching was very fashionable. The entire Parisian beau monde sought treatment from him for nervous disorders. Mesmer became extremely wealthy, but failed to stop in time and demanded a separate palace and more money. The French did not forgive him for this. A government commission quickly declared him a charlatan and decided to take repressive measures against the audacious charlatan. However, warned by Mesmer's admirers, he fled to England in time. Representatives of the Crow's banking dynasty lived in houses number 17 and number 19. They are remembered by descendants for assembling a unique collection of paintings by the best European masters. At one time, the Russian Empress Catherine II bought the collection for a fortune. Now the paintings are kept in the Hermitage. Among them are priceless masterpieces by Rembrandt, Rubens, Raphael, and Titian. The massive column stands as perhaps the most striking feature of Vendome Square. It's almost an exact replica of Trajan's column in Rome, but surpasses it by a whole 14 meters. Standing at 44 meters tall, excluding Napoleon's statue on top, the column is cast in bronze, melted down from Austrian and Russian cannons, symbolic trophies from the Battle of Austerlitz. Crafting the Vendome column required 1,250 cannons. Adorning it are 76 reliefs depicting episodes from Napoleon's military campaigns in 1805. Erected in 1810, the column initially sported a statue of the emperor clad in a Roman toga. However, in 1814, after the Allies defeated the French army, they shamefully removed and melted down the statue. For years, the column bore only a white flag. 20 years later, King Louis-Philippe ordered Napoleon's statue back atop the column, though this time portraying the little corporal, not the great commander. The Paris Commune, which significantly reduced Paris's monuments, did not overlook the Vendome column. Head of the Art Commission, artist Gustave Courbet, deemed it a symbol of misguided glory and insisted on its demolition. Toppled into a heap of horse manure amidst the crowd's scornful whistles, the column was later reinstated at Courbet's expense after the Paris Commune's fall, bankrupting the artist in the process. Vendome Square exudes timeless beauty, particularly in the evening. Its intimate atmosphere and spectacular lighting always draw crowds, providing a rare opportunity to admire a place associated with some of history's finest individuals. While France may not be renowned for the expressive architecture of its town halls like Belgium or Germany, the Paris City Hall stands as an exception. Majestic, harmonious, and adorned with sculptures and clocks, it is Paris's architectural jewel. The pedestrian square, known as Grève since medieval times, was once a site for public executions. Gallows and a pillory adorned the square, where common criminals were hanged, aristocrats beheaded, and heretics and witches burned at the stake. Executions persisted for centuries, often drawing crowds who witnessed them before the City Hall. Notable literary characters such as Esmeralda, La Mole, and Geoffrey de Perrac met their end here. In 1792, the guillotine's functional reliability was tested, drawing a huge crowd eager to see the new machine in action. Some spectators, disappointed by the swift pronouncement of the verdict, even demanded a repeat performance. Medieval Paris, home to 300,000 residents, was one of Europe's largest cities. In 1533, to emphasize the city's status and grandeur, the construction of the City Hall was entrusted to the Italian architect Domenico da Cortona. It's worth noting that he succeeded in his task. The City Hall adorned both the square and Paris simultaneously. Interestingly, during the Middle Ages, the clock on the City Hall was almost unique in Paris. Only wealthy citizens could afford pocket watches, so the clock was lavishly adorned. However, a massive fire nearly destroyed the beautiful building, and restoration efforts were sluggish until the personal intervention of Louis XIV. The current appearance of the City Hall reveals its architectural style as eclectic, blending elements of Gothic and Baroque with Empire and Art Nouveau against the backdrop of early neoclassicism. Since the era of the Sun King, the City Hall has preserved 4 facades adorned with 100 statues of famous compatriots and 30 symbolic representations of France's main cities. The bell tower, whose carillon comprises 65 bells, is one of the largest in Europe. Even today, the sound of the bells momentarily captivates passers-by. Of particular interest is the bronze hammer on the doors of the City Hall. Its striking surface is shaped like a soft spot below the spine. Parisian legends about it are countless. City halls, or town halls, are special buildings in all French cities. Besides their direct administrative purpose, they served as residential palaces, housing the apartments of acting mayors. Paris was no exception. Moreover, as history attests, the Paris City Hall became the center of all state changes, uprisings, and French revolutions. Today, the square in front of the City Hall is known for more pleasant events. In winter, it hosts an ice rink, while in summer, there are tennis courts and ephemeral gardens. A vintage 20th century carousel, of which there are only 3 in Paris, is constantly in operation. Inside the Paris City Hall is the largest reception hall in the country. It's often visited by dignitaries from many countries worldwide to make fateful decisions in France. The Grève Square, along with the City Hall, is an extremely attractive place in Paris, which tourists always rush to see. Then they patiently wait in line under the wall of the elegant building because they have an irresistible desire to see if the interior of the City Hall will impress them as much. Gardens of the Champs-Élysées. The Champs-Élysées is not just a street in Paris. Tourists from all over the world strive to visit it. Leisurely strolling along, guests of the capital enjoy the views of the wide boulevard connecting the Palais de la Concorde and the Arc de Triomphe. The beauty and elegance of the Champs-Élysées have never left anyone indifferent. It's hard to imagine now, but this area was once just a swamp where the royal nobility hunted ducks. In the 17th century, Queen Marie de' Medici ordered the hunting grounds to be transformed into a luxurious garden, which would be an extension of the Tuileries Park. The Gardens of the Champs-Élysées were designed in 1667 by the master of garden art, André Le Nôtre. He built a wide promenade, lined with 2 rows of elms on either side, and flower beds in the symmetrical style of a French formal garden. Later, Madame Pompadour, the favorite of the French King Louis XV, spent a night crying, and by morning she complained to her influential brother about the aesthetic confusion of the previous gardeners. In 1765, the garden was promptly redesigned, and the Champs-Élysées Boulevard extended to the Place des Étoiles. The leaders of the French Revolution looked condescendingly at the royal garden heritage, removing only the sculptural depictions of horses along with their monarch riders. Instead, new ones appeared, which influenced the historical events of Europe at that time. After Napoleon's downfall and the restoration of the French monarchy, the gardens of the Champs-Élysées had to be saved. In 1814, Russian, English, and Prussian troops triumphantly entered Paris, settled in the park, and unceremoniously chopped down elite trees for firewood, and slept on the lawns. King Louis Philippe could not bear to look at the mutilated beauty of his ancestors and ordered the redesign of the Palais de la Concorde and the gardens of the Champs-Élysées. He preserved their original architectural line, but removed the ceremonial function, turning them into parks for walks, relaxation, and entertainment. A real miracle in the Champs-Élysées garden was the theater, whose open-air stages hosted dramatic, musical, and circus performances. Louis Philippe was a fervent admirer of playful water, so decorative fountains were installed around the garden, 3 of which still operate today. The Palace of Industry, built for the Paris exhibition of 1855, destroyed the beauty of the Champs-Élysées garden. The construction pleased French pride. The structure turned out to be larger than the Crystal Palace in London. The Palace of Industry stood in the gardens of the Champs-Élysées until 1897, not enhancing its beauty until it was demolished for the future Grand Palais, the Grand Palace. After the World Exhibition, the gardens of the Champs-Élysées were renovated in the English style. Instead of the old elms, young chestnuts were planted, walkways were arranged, and flower beds of attractive geometric shapes were created. The park has once again burst into life with flowers. Beauty has returned to it, offering a sense of cozy tranquility. The blooming flower beds and the smooth emerald green of the lawns instantly evoke romantic memories for visitors and quickly instill a belief in the inevitability of new ones. The opening of the new Diorama Theater, where large historical paintings were showcased for the first time in Europe for public viewing, fueled Parisians' long-standing love for spectacles. Moreover, the Champs-Élysées Park became a place where Parisian society gathered to critique others' artistic ideas and boast loudly about their own. Near the Champs-Élysées garden, there is a place that curious tourists always try to slip into. It is still considered one of the most mysterious in Paris. This is the Élysée Palace, the residence of the President of the French Republic, and a luxurious neoclassical estate from the 18th century. Tourists are only allowed access once a year, at the beginning of September, and even then, only to certain rooms. For example, you won't be able to see the Silver Hall, where in 1815 Napoleon Bonaparte signed his abdication from the throne. Access is prohibited. The same goes for the president's private office in the Golden Hall, the interior of which has remained unchanged since 1861. But don't despair. Look around. There is a beautiful park paradise waiting for you, where you will find centuries-old tranquility amidst the splendor of incomparable beauty. Indeed, in the Champs-Élysées garden of Paris, there reigns an incomparable sense of peace and inner freedom. It's an intoxicating feeling. It's very much like that moment of happiness when you eagerly drink a glass of good French wine, and you never regret it. What would I like to say in conclusion? In Paris, one simple thing makes us happy: Paris itself. It's when the desired dream comes true for those who have never been there, and its beautiful image remains dear to the heart forever. And for those who return to see Paris again and again, to examine more closely what is hidden for a special occasion. Altogether, for everyone and each one, it is very convincing that the capital of France is indeed a magical city. Celebratory, luxurious, and endlessly romantic.